Dr. Hannah Lee pressed her face against the cold metal window of the research shuttle as it descended through the thick purple clouds. Of Kepler 4:4 to see, the forest moon spread out below her like a living carpet of silver and blue trees that seemed to glow with their own inner light. She had been dreaming of this moment for 3 years, ever since the Colonial Survey tagged this moon for terraforming operations. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Captain Taypark said from the pilot's seat. His weathered hands moved smoothly over the controls as he guided the shuttle toward their landing zone. "Hard to believe we're going to turn all this into farmland and mining sites." Hannah winced at his words but said nothing. She clutched her sample containers tighter and watched the alien forest grow larger as they approached. Something about the way the trees moved in the wind looked almost like they were reaching toward the shuttle, as if welcoming them home. Shuttle touched down in a clearing near the edge of what the orbital scans had labeled as Sector 7. Commander Sol Kim was already waiting for them with a team of excavation workers. His thick arms were crossed as he watched the shuttle land, and Hannah could see the impatience written across his broad face. "About time," Sol said as the shuttle door hissed open. "We've got a schedule to keep. The terraforming equipment arrives in 6 weeks, and we need these soil samples processed before then." Hannah stepped out onto the moon's surface and immediately felt something she hadn't expected. The ground beneath her boots seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, like a slow heartbeat. The air smelled of flowers and something else she couldn't identify, something that made her think of old libraries and deep caves. "Did you feel that?" she asked Captain Tay as he joined her outside the shuttle. "Feel what?" Tay looked around the clearing, his hand resting on his sidearm out of habit. "Everything looks normal to me." Hannah knelt down and pressed her palm against the soft earth. The pulsing sensation was stronger now, and she could swear she heard something, like music coming from deep underground. She pulled out her scanner and ran it over the soil. The readings made her frown. "This is strange," she muttered, checking the device again. "The electromagnetic signatures are off the charts, and these mineral compositions don't match the orbital surveys at all." Sol Kim walked over and looked at her scanner with obvious skepticism. Probably just interference from the shuttle engines. "These old scanners pick up all kinds of false readings. No, this is different." Hannah stood up and brushed the purple dirt from her knees. "Look at these patterns. They're too regular to be natural geological formations. It's almost like there's some kind of network running beneath the surface." "Network of what?" Sol asked, his tone making it clear he thought she was wasting time. "I don't know yet, but I think we should run more detailed scans before we start any excavation work." Sol's laugh was harsh. "Dr. Lee, we're not here to study fairy tales. We're here to prepare this moon for colonization. Chief Engineer Bo Han is already setting up the deep drilling equipment on the other side of the continent. We can't slow down the operation every time someone thinks they hear spooky noises underground." Hannah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not talking about spooky noises. I'm talking about organized energy patterns that suggest this moon might harbor indigenous life forms." "Indigenous life forms?" Captain Tay raised an eyebrow. "The orbital surveys found nothing but plants and some small animals. Nothing that would interfere with terraforming. The orbital surveys couldn't detect what I'm seeing here." Hannah held up her scanner. "These readings suggest something much more complex than we initially thought." For the next 6 hours, Hannah collected samples while Sol's team marked locations for future mining operations. Every test she ran confirmed her initial findings. The soil contained traces of organized metallic compounds that formed intricate patterns. The electromagnetic readings showed a vast network of energy flowing beneath the surface, like the nervous system of some enormous creature. When they returned to the research vessel New Dawn that evening, Hannah immediately requested a meeting with the Colonial Council representatives. Director Wu Chang and Admiral Min Ko listened to her preliminary report with polite but obvious disinterest. Dr. Lee, Director Wu said, leaning back in his chair, "Your enthusiasm for your work is commendable, but we can't delay a multi-credit terraforming operation based on unusual mineral readings." "But sir, if there are sentient beings living beneath the surface," Admiral Min Ko interrupted. "That's a very big if, Dr. Ranivan. If your readings are accurate, they could indicate any number of natural phenomena. Underground water, systems, mineral deposits, volcanic activity. Hannah spread her data tablets across the conference table. Look at these patterns. They're too organized, too purposeful to be natural. And the electromagnetic pulses have a rhythm that suggests communication. Director Wu glanced at the data for barely 10 seconds before pushing the tablets back toward her. Doctor, I appreciate your thoroughness, but the Colonial Survey has already invested too much in this operation to stop now. Chief Engineer Bo Han assures us that his equipment can handle any geological surprises we might encounter. What if they're not geological surprises? Hannah asked desperately. What if we're about to destroy an entire civilization? The silence in the room was heavy and uncomfortable. Admiral Min Kao finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. Dr. Lee, I think the isolation and stress of deep space exploration might be affecting your judgment. Perhaps you should take some time to rest and review your findings more objectively. My judgment is fine, Hannah said, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. And my findings are accurate. This moon is inhabited by something intelligent, and we need to make contact before we start tearing it apart. Director Wu stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. Your concerns have been noted, Doctor. However, the terraforming schedule will proceed as planned. I'm reassigning you to routine survey duties until further notice. Hannah felt her heart sink. Sir, please, the decision is final. Admiral Min Kao's tone left no room for argument. You're to report to Science Officer Jun Park tomorrow morning for reassignment. As Hannah walked back to her quarters, she passed Chief Engineer Bo Han in the corridor. He gave her a sympathetic smile that somehow made everything worse. Take it personally, Doc, he said. The brass never listens to the science team until something explodes. By then, it's usually too late to fix anything. Alone in her room, Hannah stared out at the glowing forest moon through her porthole. Somewhere down there, beneath those beautiful silver trees, something was alive and aware, and possibly trying to communicate. And tomorrow, the drilling would begin. She made a decision that would change everything. If the council wouldn't listen to her official reports, she would have to find another way to protect whatever was living beneath that purple soil, even if it meant risking her career and her reputation. The moon's soft light seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat as she began planning her return to the surface. 3 days after her reassignment, Hannah found herself trudging through the purple mud of Sector 12 with Science Officer Jun Park and his survey team. They were supposed to be collecting routine soil samples for the Agricultural Planning Committee, but Hannah had other plans. This sector looks pretty much like all the others, Jun said, wiping sweat from his forehead as they walked between the towering silver trees. Same weird glowing plants, same purple dirt, same creepy feeling like something's watching us. Hannah's heart jumped at his words. You feel it too, the sensation of being observed. Jun shrugged and adjusted his heavy equipment pack. It's probably just because everything here is so alien. Makes a person paranoid. He looked at her with concern. You've been pretty quiet since your meeting with the council. Everything okay? Fine, Hannah lied, focusing on her scanner readings. The electromagnetic patterns were even stronger here than they had been in Sector 7. Whatever network existed beneath this moon, it was most active in areas far from the main human settlement. By mid-afternoon, Chen's team had spread out across a wide valley to collect their required samples. Hannah volunteered to work the eastern ridge alone, claiming she wanted to test some new equipment calibrations. In reality, she wanted freedom to investigate the strange readings without Jun asking uncomfortable questions. The ridge overlooked a grove of particularly tall trees whose silver bark seemed to pulse with gentle blue light. Hannah set up her equipment and began running deep scans, pushing her instruments far beyond their normal operating parameters. The results made her hands shake with excitement. The underground network wasn't just active here, it was practically singing. Her sensors detected organized patterns of energy that flowed like rivers beneath her feet. The signals had structure, rhythm, and what could only be described as purpose. This wasn't geological activity or random electromagnetic noise. This was communication. Hannah knelt down and pressed her scanner directly against the soft earth. The device immediately began picking up low-frequency pulses that seemed to respond to her presence. When she moved the scanner to different locations, the pulse patterns changed, as if something was trying to acknowledge her movements. Incredible, she whispered, recording everything on her personal datapad. "You're really down there, aren't you?" The pulses suddenly stopped. Hannah froze, wondering if she had somehow disrupted the signals. Then the tree behind her began to glow brighter, its silver bark shifting from blue to a warm golden color. She turned around slowly and nearly dropped her equipment. Something was emerging from the base of the massive tree, flowing upward like liquid light given form. It rose to nearly 3 meters in height, its body composed of what looked like living energy wrapped in translucent skin. Patterns of bioluminescence raced across its surface in waves of blue and gold. Hannah's first instinct was to run, but something about the creature's posture seemed peaceful. It made no aggressive movements, didn't approach her, just stood there, with what might have been curiosity written in its shifting light patterns. "Hello," she said softly. Feeling foolish but not knowing what else to do, the creature's light patterns changed immediately. Cycling through rapid combinations of color and intensity, Hannah realized it was trying to communicate, responding to the sound of her voice with visual signals. She slowly reached for her scanner and pointed it at the creature. The electromagnetic readings went wild, showing patterns of incredible complexity. The being wasn't just communicating with light, it was also producing organized electromagnetic fields that her equipment could barely interpret. "You're trying to talk to me, aren't you?" Hannah asked, keeping her voice gentle and non-threatening. More light patterns, faster now, almost excited. The creature took a small step closer, and Hannah could see that its luminescent skin contained what looked like flowing veins of pure energy. It was beautiful and alien, and completely unlike anything in the xenobiology textbooks. Hannah held up her scanner so the creature could see it. "This device reads electromagnetic signals. Can you understand what I'm showing you?" The being's light patterns suddenly became very organized, pulsing in regular intervals that matched the rhythm Hannah had detected in the underground network. It was showing her that it understood the connection between her equipment and the signals she had been studying. Over the next hour, Hannah and the creature worked together to establish basic communication. She learned that the being could control its electromagnetic output to interact with her scanner, creating simple patterns that she could record and analyze. In return, she used her equipment to generate electromagnetic pulses that the creature seemed to understand as intentional signals. The breakthrough came when Hannah realized the creature was showing her maps. The light patterns on its skin corresponded to the underground network her scanner had detected, with bright nodes representing what she now understood to be other members of its species. The network wasn't just communication infrastructure, it was a living community spread across the entire moon. "There are more of you," Hannah said, pointing to the various nodes on her scanner display. "Many more." The creature's response was a wave of golden light that felt unmistakably sad. Several of the nodes that had been bright a few days ago were now dim or completely dark. The being was showing her that its people were dying. Hannah checked her readings from the areas where Chief Engineer Bo Han had begun his drilling operations. Her blood ran cold as she realized the correlation. Every location where the humans had dug deep into the moon's crust corresponded to areas where the creature's network had gone dark. "We're killing you," she whispered in horror. "The drilling, the excavation, we're destroying your people." The creature's light patterns became urgent, almost frantic. It began projecting new images, showing Hannah visions of the moon as it had been before the humans arrived. The underground network had been a vast web of light connecting thousands of beings. Now, less than a quarter of those connections remained active. "I have to stop this," Hannah said, more to herself than to the creature. "I have to make them understand." The being moved closer and extended what might have been an arm toward her scanner. When its energy field touched the device, Hannah's equipment filled with new data, complex patterns that would take her days to analyze. The creature was sharing information, with her giving her proof of its intelligence and the scope of its people's civilization. "Thank you," Hannah said. "I'll call you Keeper, because you're keeping your people's knowledge safe." Keeper's light patterns shifted to what Hannah was learning to recognize as acknowledgement. The being then began to fade, its form becoming translucent. As it prepared to return to the underground network, before it disappeared completely, Keeper projected one final image. It was a star map showing the space around Kepler-4 to see, with dark shapes moving between the stars. The shapes were coming, toward their solar system, and they looked like they were moving fast. "What are those?" Hannah asked, but Keeper was already gone, leaving only a faint glow in the tree bark to show that their meeting had been real. Hannah packed her equipment with shaking hands. She had made first contact with an intelligent alien species, but that was only the beginning. Keeper's final message suggested that the creatures knew about some kind of threat approaching from deep space, and the human mining operations were destroying the only beings who might be able to warn them about it. As she walked back to rejoin Chun's team, Hannah knew that convincing the Colonial Council would be even harder now. They had dismissed her claims about underground life forms, but telling them about shape-shifting energy beings and mysterious threats from space would make her sound completely insane. She had to find another way to protect Keepers, people, and she had to do it before the drilling operations expanded into more sectors. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was coming. 2 weeks had passed since Hannah's first meeting with Keeper, and the situation on the moon was getting worse every day. The thunderous noise of the machines could be heard across half the continent as they tore into the moon's crust, searching for mineral deposits and preparing the ground for terraforming. Hannah stood on the observation deck of the New Dawn, watching the distant flashes of light from the drilling operation. Each flash meant another section of Keeper's network was being destroyed. Her scanner readings showed the underground energy patterns growing weaker by the hour. "You look terrible, Science Officer," Jun Park said, joining her at the window. "When's the last time you slept?" Hannah rubbed her tired eyes. She had been spending every free moment analyzing the data Keeper had shared with her, trying to understand the complex information the creature had downloaded into her scanner. "I've been busy with research on what your official assignment is: soil classification for the agricultural team." Chen's voice carried concern and a hint of suspicion. "Dr. Yan Cho mentioned that you've been asking a lot of strange questions about electromagnetic phenomena and underground ecosystems." "It's related to my work," Hannah said, which was technically true. Everything she was doing was related to understanding the moon's true nature. Even if she couldn't explain that to Jun, Lieutenant Nara Yoon approached them from across the observation deck. Her security uniform was crisp, and her expression was serious. "Dr. Lee, Captain Tae wants to see you in his quarters. He has some concerns about your recent behavior." She had been hoping to avoid official attention until she could find a way to prove what she had discovered. The kind that happen when a scientist starts disappearing for hours at a time and filing equipment requests for unauthorized research projects, Nara said. Her tone wasn't unkind, but it was firm. "You've been acting strangely since your reassignment." Hannah knew that any attempt to explain her discoveries would sound like the ramblings of someone who had spent too much time alone on an alien world. But she had to try. Captain Tae was waiting for her with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. His quarters were small but comfortable, with pictures of his family back on Earth and maps of their current mission area covering one wall. "Sit down, Hannah," he said gently. "I've known you for 3 years and I've never seen you like this. What's going on?" Hannah took a deep breath and decided to tell him everything. She explained her discovery of the underground network, her meeting with Keeper, and the data that proved the existence of an intelligent species living beneath the moon's surface. She showed him her scanner readings and the electromagnetic patterns that clearly indicated organized communication. Captain Tae listened without interruption, his expression growing more worried with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet. For a long moment, "Hannah," he said finally, "do you understand how this sounds? I know it sounds impossible, but the evidence is all there. Look at these readings." With her, Tae studied the information for several minutes, his trained eye examining the data carefully. "These patterns are definitely unusual, I'll give you that. But patterns in electromagnetic readings could mean a dozen different things. Underground water, mineral deposits, even interference from our own equipment. But what about the response? Patterns? The way the signals change when I interact with them. Could be feedback loops, resonance effects from your scanner's own emissions." Tae's voice was gentle but firm. "You're seeing patterns where there might not be any." Before Hannah could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the ship. The lights on the bridge flickered, and she could hear crew members running in the corridors outside. "Emergency in Sector 9," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. All medical and engineering personnel report to Shuttle Bay to immediately. Captain Tay was on his feet instantly. That's where Bohan's main drilling, the operation, is located. He grabbed his communication device. This is Captain Park. What's the situation? Sir, we've had a major accident at the drilling site, came Bohan's voice, crackling with static and background noise. We've got injured workers and equipment failures across the entire operation. Hannah felt her blood turn cold. She knew exactly what the drill had hit, and it wasn't a geological formation. The shuttle ride to Sector 9 was tense and silent. Hannah sat with the medical team, watching the forest moon rush past below them. As they approached the drilling site, she could see the damage immediately. What had once been a grove of the beautiful silver trees, workers ran between damaged machines, while medics treated injured crew members. The massive drilling platform that had been the centerpiece of the operation was tilted at a dangerous angle, partially collapsed into a huge crater that hadn't been there that morning. What happened? Captain Tay asked Bohan as they approached. The main accident site, Bohan's face was pale and streaked with dirt. We were making good progress on the deep bore when suddenly all our equipment started going crazy. Electromagnetic interference like you wouldn't believe. Then the ground just gave way under the main platform. Hannah looked into the crater and saw something that made her heart break. The hole was filled with a faint golden glow that was slowly fading to darkness. The drilling equipment had broken through into one of the major nodes of Keeper's network, and the damage was catastrophic. How many people were hurt? Dr. Yan Cho asked, already moving toward the injured workers. 6 with serious injuries. 12 more with minor cuts and bruises, Bohan replied. We were lucky it wasn't worse. Our geological surveys showed solid rock at that depth. Hannah pulled out her scanner and ran it over the crater. The electromagnetic readings were chaotic, showing the death throes of whatever network hub the drilling had destroyed. She could see fragments of organized patterns in the data, like the last words of a dying language. Dr. Lee, what are you doing? Our rescue equipment? Hannah lied, continuing her scans. What she found in the data made her stomach turn. The drilling hadn't just destroyed one node of the network, it had sent shockwaves through the entire system. Her scanner showed dozens of other nodes going dark across the continent as the damage spread through the underground community. Night, back aboard the New Dawn, Hannah tried to sleep but couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Somewhere beneath the moon's surface, Keeper's people were dying because of human actions. The excavation had turned from environmental destruction into something approaching genocide. She slipped out of her quarters and made her way to the shuttle bay. Learn more about his people's situation. Maybe together they could find a way to stop the drilling before it. It was too late. But as she prepared to take an unauthorized shuttle trip to the surface, her scanner picked up something new. The approaching shapes that Keeper had shown her in his star map were no longer just distant threats. According to her readings, they had entered the outer edge of the solar system and were moving toward Kepler-4 for to see at incredible speed. Whatever was coming, it would arrive long before the humans finished their terraforming project. And now, thanks to the drilling disaster, the only beings who might have been able to warn them about it were dying. Hannah crept through the moonlit forest of Sector 12, her unauthorized shuttle hidden in a clearing 2 kilometers behind her. She had waited until the night shift changed to slip away from the New Dawn, knowing that Security Chief Daewon would be busy with his patrol schedules. Her scanner led her deeper into the woods. Following the faint electromagnetic traces that remained of Keeper's network, the silver trees around her were darker than before. Their natural glow dimmed to barely visible flickers. The drilling disaster had affected the entire ecosystem, and Hannah could see the damage everywhere she looked. Leaves that had once shimmered with blue light were now turning gray and falling to the purple earth just she found. Keeper near the same grove where they had first met, but he looked different now. His luminescent form was smaller and less stable, flickering like a candle flame in the wind. The patterns of light across his translucent skin moved slowly and seemed filled with pain. Keeper, Hannah called softly as she approached. I'm so sorry. About what happened, I tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. The being turned toward her, and his light patterns shifted to what she had learned meant recognition and sadness. He moved closer, his form wavering with each step, and touched her scanner with his energy field. Immediately, Hannah's device filled with new information. But this data was different from what Keeper had shared before. Instead of complex technical patterns, she was receiving something that felt more like memories or visions. Images flowed through her scanner and into her mind. Showing her the true history of Keeper's people, she saw worlds beyond counting, each one connected by networks of beings like Keeper. They were called the Guardians, and they had been watching the galaxy for millions of years. Their purpose was not to rule or conquer, but to serve as an early warning system against an ancient threat that moved between the stars. The visions showed her the enemy they watched for. Creatures of metal and hunger that consumed entire solar systems before moving on to the next. They were called the Devourers, and they had destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. The Guardians were the only defense against them, using their network to detect the Devourers' approach and warn other species in time to prepare or flee. "You're not just protecting your own world," Hannah whispered as the visions continued. "You're protecting everyone." Keeper's light patterns confirmed her understanding. The Guardian network on this moon was part of a galaxy-spanning communication, a system that had been monitoring the space between stars for signs of Devourer activity. For the past several months, the network had been detecting disturbing signals from the edge of the galaxy. The Devourers were coming, and they were closer than anyone realized. Hannah watched in growing horror as Keeper showed her what would happen. When the Devourers arrived, the mechanical swarm would consume everything in the solar system, starting with the outer planets and working their way inward. Planets would be stripped of all useful materials, their populations either killed or absorbed into the Devourer collective. "How long do we have?" she asked. Keeper's response was a series of light patterns that Hannah's scanner translated into time measurements. According to his calculations, the Devourers would reach Kepler-4 for 2C in less than 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Hannah repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "And your network is dying because of our drilling operations." The being's form flickered more violently, and Hannah realized he was using the last of his energy to share this information with her. The destruction of the major network nodes had cut off most of the Guardians from their power source, and they were fading rapidly. But Keeper had one more vision to share with her. He showed her images of other worlds where similar situations had occurred. Places where the Guardians had worked with local species to defend against the Devourers. It was possible to fight them, but only if the organic beings and the Guardians worked together. "You want to form an alliance," Hannah said. "Humans and Guardians fighting side by side." Keeper's light patterns showed agreement, but also uncertainty. The human drilling operations had damaged the network so severely that most of his people were already too weak to fight. The few survivors would need human help to restore their power systems, and humans would need Guardian technology to have any hope against the Devers or Hanas. Hannah spent the next hour recording everything Keeper shared with her, storing the data in multiple backup devices. When the being finally began to fade back into the underground network, she knew she had enough information to convince even the most skeptical official. The problem was getting anyone to listen to her. The return trip to the New Dawn was tense. Hannah's unauthorized absence had been discovered, and Security Chief Day 1 was waiting for her in the shuttle bay when she arrived. "Dr. Lee," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "Captain Park would like to see you immediately." The meeting in Captain Tay's quarters was awkward and uncomfortable. Admiral Min Ko and Director Wu Chang had been called in from the main colony ship, and their expressions made it clear that they considered Hannah's behavior a serious problem. Dr. Lee, Admiral Min Ka began taking an unauthorized shuttle to conduct unsanctioned research is a serious violation of colonial regulations. But before we discuss disciplinary action, we want to understand what you thought you were accomplishing. Hannah took a deep breath and began explaining everything she had learned from Keeper. She showed them the data about the Guardian network, the approaching Devourer threat, and the possibility of forming a defensive alliance. She spoke carefully and logically, presenting the evidence in the most scientific way possible. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "Dr. Lee," Director Wu Chang said finally, "what you're describing sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie. Energy beings who protect the galaxy from mechanical monsters. It's simply not credible." "But the data is all here," Hannah insisted, holding up her scanner. The electromagnetic patterns, the network structures, the astronomical calculations about the approaching threat. Data that could be interpreted in dozens of different ways. Admiral Min Ko replied, Dr. Yan Cho has reviewed your previous reports, and she believes you may be suffering from a form of isolation psychosis brought on by extended exposure to alien environments. Hannah felt her heart sink as Dr. Yan Cho nodded in agreement. The symptoms are consistent with what we've seen in other deep space researchers. Hallucinations, paranoid thinking, the belief that you're receiving communications from non-existent entities. They're not hallucinations, Hannah said desperately. I can prove it. Give me permission to take a team back to the surface, and I'll show you the Guardians myself. Absolutely not, Captain Tay said firmly. You're clearly not thinking rationally, and I won't risk other crew members on what amounts to a wild fantasy. What about the drilling accident? Hannah asked. How do you explain the electromagnetic interference and the ground collapse? Geological instability caused by our excavation activities, Chief Engineer Bo Han said from the corner of the room. It's unfortunate, but not unprecedented in mining operations. Hannah realized that nothing she said would convince them. The evidence that seemed so clear to her was being dismissed as the ramblings of an unstable mind. Meanwhile, somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Devourers were moving closer every day. I'm ordering you to report to Dr. Yan Cho for psychological evaluation, Admiral Min Ka said. Until she clears you for duty, you're confined to quarters and prohibited from accessing any research equipment. As Security Chief Daewon escorted her from the meeting, Hannah knew that her official attempts to warn humanity were over. If she was going to save both species from the approaching threat, she would have to find another way. But time was running out, and soon the Devourers would arrive to find both humans and Guardians completely unprepared for the battle of their lives. Hannah had been confined to her quarters for 5 days when the first alarm rang throughout the new dawn. She was lying on her small bunk, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Keeper's warnings, when the emergency lights began flashing red, and the ship's communication system crackled to life. All hands to battle stations, came Captain Tay's voice over the speakers. Unknown vessels have been detected at the edge of the solar system. This is not a drill. Hannah's blood turned cold. She rushed to her small porthole and pressed her face against the glass, trying to see anything in the star-filled darkness. The timing was exactly what Keeper had predicted, but she had hoped against hope that somehow his calculations were wrong. The door to her quarters suddenly opened, and Lieutenant Nara Yoon stepped inside. Her face was pale, and her hand rested. On her sidearm, Dr. Lee, Captain Park wants you on the bridge immediately, Nara said. We're tracking over 300 unknown contacts, and they're moving toward us at impossible speeds. Hannah's heart pounded as she followed Nara through the corridors of the ship. Crew members ran past them, heading to their emergency stations. The atmosphere was tense with barely controlled panic. The bridge was chaos when they arrived. Officers bent over sensor displays, while Captain Tay stood in the center, trying to coordinate responses from multiple departments. Admiral Min Ko was present via video link from the main colony ship, his face grim. Dr. Lee, Captain Tay said, when he saw her, I know we've had our disagreements, but you're our best xenobiologist. I need you to look at these sensor readings and tell me what we're dealing with. Commander Sol Kim handed her a data tablet showing the incoming objects. Hannah's hands shook as she studied the information. The contacts were massive, each one larger than the biggest human starship. They moved in perfect formation and seemed to be made of some kind of metal that absorbed most sensor scans. They matched the descriptions Keeper showed me, Hannah said quietly. These are the Devourers. The what? Admiral Min Ko's voice came through the communication link, sharp with disbelief. The threat I've been trying to warn you about. The Guardian network detected them months ago, but no one would listen to me. Hannah turned to face the main screen, where distant points of light were growing larger by the minute. They're a mechanical swarm that consumes entire solar systems. Science Officer Jun Park looked up from his sensor station, his face white with fear. Captain, they're not just moving toward us. They're moving toward everything. I'm reading similar swarms approaching every planet and major asteroid in the system. How many ships are we talking about? Commander Sol Kim asked. It's not ships, Hannah said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's more like a living machine made up of millions of smaller parts. Each individual unit is about the size of a fighter craft, but they work together as a single organism. The main screen suddenly filled with an image that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The lead elements of the Devourer swarm had come close enough for visual contact, and what they saw defied description. The individual units looked like metallic insects, each one bristling with weapons and cutting tools. They moved in perfect synchronization, creating patterns in space that were both beautiful and terrifying. "Admiral, we need to evacuate the colony immediately," Captain Tay said. "Get every civilian onto the transport ships and send them toward the outer system." Negative, Admiral Min Ko replied. "We have too much invested in this operation to abandon it based on the appearance of some unknown aliens. I'm ordering the defense fleet to intercept and establish communication." Hannah watched in horror as the human warships moved to intercept the Devourer swarm. She knew from Keeper's visions that conventional weapons would be useless against them, but she had no way to convince the Admiral to change his orders. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. The human ships opened fire with everything they had, sending missiles and energy weapons toward the approaching swarm. The Devourers simply absorbed the attacks, their metallic forms adapting to each new weapon type within seconds. Then the Devourers responded. Streams of energy lanced out from the swarm, and human ships began disappearing from the sensor displays one by one. The aliens didn't just destroy the vessels, they seemed to dismantle them at the atomic level, consuming every useful material and leaving nothing behind. "Fall back," Admiral Min Ko ordered, but his voice was shaking. "All ships retreat to defensive." Positions around the colony, Science Officer Jun Park suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive electromagnetic activity from the moon's surface. Something big is happening down there." Hannah rushed to his console and looked at the readings. Her heart leaped with hope as she recognized the patterns. "It's the Guardian Network. They're still alive, and they're trying to activate their defenses." "The what network?" Commander Sol Kim demanded. "The beings I've been trying to tell you about," Hannah said urgently. "They've been preparing for this attack for millions of years, but our drilling operations damaged their power systems. They need our help to restore their defensive capabilities." Captain Tay looked at the tactical display, where the Devourer swarm was systematically destroying everything in its path. Half the human fleet was already gone, and the aliens were moving toward the moon at incredible speed. "Even if what you're saying is true," he said, "how could we possibly help them?" Lieutenant Narayun looked up from the communication station. "Captain, I'm receiving a signal from the moon's surface. It's not on any frequency I recognize, but it's definitely artificial." "Put it through the main speakers," Captain Tay ordered. The bridge filled with a sound unlike anything they had ever heard. It was part music, part electromagnetic pulse, and part something that seemed to speak directly to their minds. The patterns were complex and beautiful, but also urgent and desperate. "That's Guardian communication. They're calling for help. They're dying, but they're still trying to protect us." Dr. Yan Cho, who had been watching from the medical station, suddenly spoke up. "Dr. Lee, if these beings are real, and if they can fight these Devourer things, then we need to listen to you. What do they need from us?" Hannah wiped her eyes and focused on her scanner, which was picking up detailed information from the Guardian transmission. "They need power. The drilling operations severed their connection to the moon's energy core. If we can restore those connections, they might be able to activate their defensive systems." "How?" Chief Engineer Bohan asked from his position near the engineering station. "We need to go down to the surface and physically reconnect the damaged network nodes," Hannah said. "It will require human technology combined with Guardian guidance." Captain Tay looked at the tactical display again. The Devourer swarm had reached the outer edge of the moon's orbital space and was beginning to deploy around the celestial body like a living net. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Maybe an hour." "Before they start consuming the moon itself," Hannah replied, "but if we can restore the Guardian network, we might have a chance to fight back." Admiral Min Ko's voice crackled over the communication link. "All ships, prepare for emergency evacuation. We're abandoning the colony and retreating to the outer system." "Admiral, wait," Captain Tay said. "Dr. Lee believes there might be a way to fight these things using indigenous defenses on the moon." "Captain, I don't have time for fairy tales. The enemy will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. "Then give me 30 minutes, Hannah said desperately. "Let me take a team to the surface and try to restore the Guardian network. If it doesn't work, you can still evacuate. But if it does work, we might save everyone." The bridge was silent, except for the continuing Guardian transmission, which seemed to grow more urgent with each passing moment. Finally, Captain Tay made his decision. "Admiral, I'm taking the New Dawn to the surface to support Dr. Lee's mission. If she's right, this might be our only chance. Captain, I'm ordering you to retreat with the rest of the fleet. With respect." "Sir, I'm going to have to disobey that order. Prepare the shuttles for surface deployment. We're going to try to save this moon, and maybe our entire species." As the New Dawn began its descent toward the Guardian network, Hannah could see the Devourer swarm tightening its grip around the moon like a mechanical fist. Somewhere beneath the purple soil, Keeper and his people were waiting for humanity's help. The battle for Kepler 442c was about to begin. The shuttle bay of the New Dawn was a scene of controlled chaos as teams prepared for what everyone knew might be a suicide mission. Hannah checked her equipment for the third time, while Chief Engineer Bohan loaded power coupling units that she hoped would be compatible with Guardian technology. "I still can't believe we're trusting our lives to invisible aliens," Bohan muttered as he secured a portable fusion generator to the shuttle's cargo bay. "But after what I saw those metal things do to our fleet, I'm willing to try anything." Security. Chief Daewon finished distributing weapons to his team and walked over to Hannah. "Dr. Lee, I owe you an apology. I thought you were losing your mind, but it looks like you were the only one seeing clearly." "We're not safe yet," Hannah replied, watching through the shuttle windows as more Devourer units descended from space. The mechanical creatures were landing, all across the moon's surface, beginning their systematic consumption of everything they encountered. "Even if we can restore the Guardian network, we don't know if it will be enough to fight them." Lieutenant Nara Yoon took the pilot's seat and began the pre-flight sequence. "Where exactly are we going, Dr. Lee? The Guardian signals are coming from multiple locations across the continent." Hannah consulted her scanner, which was picking up desperate communications from the surviving Guardians. "Sector 12. That's where I first met Keeper, and it's one of the few network nodes that's still partially active." The shuttle lifted off just as the first Devourer units reached the New Dawn's position. Through the rear windows, Hannah could see the mechanical creatures beginning to dismantle the research ship, their cutting tools reducing the metal hull to its component atoms. "There goes our ride home," Dr. Yen Cho said quietly from her medical station. "We'll worry about that later," Captain Tay replied from the co-pilot seat. "Right now, our priority is reaching the Guardian network before the Devourers consume it." The flight to Sector 12 was a nightmare of dodging Devourer patrols and mechanical harvesting units. The beautiful forest moon that Hannah had first admired was being systematically destroyed. Entire groves of silver trees were disappearing, as the aliens consumed everything organic and inorganic in their path. "There," Hannah said, pointing to a grove that still showed faint bioluminescent activity, "that's where Keeper's network node is located." Nara brought the shuttle down in a clearing that was already showing signs of Devourer activity. Strange geometric patterns had been carved into the purple soil, and the air smelled of ozone and burned metal. The team moved quickly toward the grove, carrying Bohan's power equipment and Hannah's communication devices. As they approached, the largest tree keeper's form began to materialize from the silvery bark. But the Guardian looked different now, his luminescent body flickering weakly and his usual graceful movements replaced by obvious pain. "Keeper," Hannah called out, activating her scanner. "We're here to help. Can you show us how to restore your network's power?" The Guardian's light patterns were dim but clearly relieved. He moved toward the equipment Bohan had brought, his energy field interacting with the devices in ways that made Hannah's scanner readings spike wildly. "He's analyzing our technology," she explained to the others, trying to figure out how to integrate it with their systems. Science Officer Jun Park was monitoring the area with his own sensors. "Dr. Lee, we've got Devourer units moving in our direction. Maybe a dozen of them, and they'll be here in less than 10 minutes. Keeper's communication became urgent, his light patterns shifting rapidly as he tried to convey complex technical information. Hannah's scanner filled with data showing the underground network structure and the specific points where human power sources could be connected. "Bohan, I need you to run power cables to these exact locations," Hannah said, showing him the coordinates on her scanner. "The connections have to be precise, or the entire network could overload." Chief Engineer Bohan looked at the readings and shook his head. This is impossible. These connection points are 50 meters underground, and some of them are in areas that have already been consumed by the devourers. Not impossible, Keeper's light patterns seem to say. The Guardian moved to the base of the largest tree and began to glow more brightly. Suddenly, the ground around them started to shift, revealing a complex network of organic conduits that led deep into the earth. He's opening access points, Dr. Yen Cho said in amazement. The entire underground system is coming to the surface. The next few minutes were a frantic race against time. Bohan and his team connected human power sources to the Guardian network nodes, while Security Chief Day 1 set up defensive positions around the grove. Hannah worked with Keeper to ensure the power transfers were compatible with Guardian biology. Contacts approaching from the east, Lieutenant Nara reported from her position near the shuttle. At least 20 Devourer units, moving fast. How? Much more time do you need? Captain Tay asked. Another 5 minutes for the primary connections, Bohan replied, sweat streaming down his face as he worked. But I don't know if this fusion generator has enough power to restart their entire network. Keeper's light patterns suddenly became very bright, and his form began to change. Instead of his usual translucent appearance, he was becoming more solid, more present. Other Guardians began to emerge from trees throughout the grove, their combined energy fields creating a visible aurora in the air above them. They're pooling their remaining life force, Hannah realized. Using our power sources as a catalyst to reactivate the network, the first Devourer units appeared at the edge of the grove just as the Guardian network came online. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The silver trees throughout the forest began to glow with brilliant light, and the ground beneath their feet hummed with power. My God, John Park whispered, watching his sensors as electromagnetic activity spread across the entire moon. The whole network is activating at once. Keeper's form was now blazing with energy, and his communication with Hannah became clearer and more direct. Through her scanner, she could feel the Guardian's thoughts as if they were her own. The network was online, but it was still too weak to fight the Devourers. Effectively, they needed something more. What do you need? Hannah asked. Keeper's response came not as light patterns, but as direct understanding. The Guardians needed to combine their organic technology with human determination and tactical thinking. They needed to become something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. An alliance, Hannah breathed. Not just cooperation, but actual fusion between our species. The Devourer units opened fire on the grove, their energy weapons cutting down trees and sending the human team scrambling for cover. But the Guardian network was ready now. Streams of pure energy erupted from the ground, meeting the alien attacks, with defensive barriers that shimmered like liquid light. It's working! Daewon shouted over the noise of battle. Whatever they're doing, it's stopping the Devourers. But Hannah could see in Keeper's communications that the defense was only temporary. The Guardians were using the last of their life, forced to protect the grove, but there were thousands of Devourer units across the moon, and more arriving from space every minute. We need to do more than just defend, she told Keeper. We need to fight back. The Guardian's response was a vision of what was possible if humans and Guardians truly joined together. She saw human tactical knowledge combined with Guardian energy, manipulation, human technology enhanced by Guardian organic systems, human courage amplified by Guardian wisdom. But the cost, Hannah whispered, understanding what Keeper was showing her. You're talking about permanent fusion. Your people would cease to exist as individuals. Keeper's light patterns showed acceptance and determination. His people had always been willing to sacrifice themselves to protect others. Now they were asking humanity to make the same choice, to join with them in creating something new that could stand against the Devourers. Hannah, what's happening? Captain Tay called out. As the Guardian energy fields began to change color and intensity, they want to merge with us, she replied. Combine our species into something that can fight the Devourers, but it means giving up what we are to become something entirely new. The battle was intensifying around them. More Devourer units were arriving, and the Guardian defenses were beginning to weaken. Soon, the protective barriers would fail, and both species would be consumed. Do it, Captain Tay said firmly. If it gives us a chance to save our people, do it. One by one, the other team members voiced their agreement. They had seen what the Devourers could do, and they knew that conventional resistance was hopeless. If fusion with the Guardians offered any hope of survival, they were willing to take that chance. Hannah looked at Kiefer, whose form was now blazing like a small star. "Are you sure about this? Once we begin, there's no going back for either of our species." The Guardians' response was clear and unwavering. They had been waiting for this moment for millions of years, the chance to find a species that could join with them in protecting the galaxy. Humanity's courage and ingenuity made them the perfect partners for this ultimate alliance. "Then let's do it," Hannah said. "Let's become something new." The transformation began immediately, with streams of Guardian energy flowing into the humans, while human consciousness merged with Guardian wisdom. The pain was incredible, but so was the sense of connection and purpose that came with it. As the fusion continued, Hannah felt herself becoming part of something far greater than she had ever imagined possible. The beast that Keeper had spoken of was finally beginning to rise. The fusion was unlike anything Hannah had ever experienced. As Guardian energy flowed through her body, she felt her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual thought. She was still herself, but also part of something infinitely larger and more complex. Through her connection to the network, she could sense Captain Tay's tactical mind merging with Guardian battle wisdom. Bohan's engineering knowledge combining with organic technology that had existed for millions of years. And Dr. Yun chose medical expertise, joining with Guardian understanding of life itself. But it was more than just sharing knowledge. The humans and Guardians were becoming something new, a hybrid entity that possessed the best qualities of both species. Human courage and determination flowed through the Guardian network, while Guardian patience and cosmic perspective tempered human impulsiveness. The transformation hurt in ways that had no words. Hannah felt her body changing as Guardian energy rewrote her genetic structure, making her stronger, faster, and more resilient. Her senses expanded to include electromagnetic spectrums she had never imagined, and her mind connected directly to the moon's entire ecosystem. Team members were undergoing similar changes. Lieutenant Nara's military training was being enhanced by Guardian combat abilities that had been developed over countless battles with the Devourers. Security Chief Day One's protective instincts merged with Guardian defensive technologies that could shield entire planets. But the most dramatic change was happening to Keeper himself. The Guardian's individual form was dissolving, spreading throughout the network and connecting with every human consciousness in the fusion. The living bridge between species, the central intelligence that would coordinate their new hybrid existence. "Can you hear me?" Hannah asked, but she wasn't speaking with her voice. The question emerged directly from her thoughts and flowed through the network to reach her companions. "Yes," came Captain Tay's reply, his mental voice carrying undertones of Guardian harmony. "This is incredible. I can feel everyone's thoughts, but we're still individuals, somehow. The network preserves identity while enabling unity," came Keeper's response, his consciousness now distributed throughout all of them. "You remain yourselves, but you are also part of something greater." The fusion process was accelerating as more Guardian survivors across the moon joined the network. Each new connection brought additional knowledge and capabilities, but also revealed the true scope of the Devourer threat. Through the network's enhanced senses, Hannah could see the entire solar system. The mechanical swarm had spread to every planet and major asteroid, systematically consuming everything in sight. Billions of individual Devourer units worked in perfect coordination, dismantling worlds and converting matter into more of themselves. But now, for the first time in galactic history, they faced opposition that could match their adaptability. "They're coming," Science Officer Jun Park reported, his enhanced awareness detecting thousands of Devourer units converging on their location. They know something has changed, and they're responding with everything they have. The hybrid entity that had once been human and Guardian teams began to rise from the grove, their new forms flowing between matter and energy as needed. Hannah found that she could exist as both physical flesh and pure electromagnetic force, shifting between states as the situation required. The beast that emerged from their fusion was beyond anything either species could have achieved alone. It possessed human tactical intelligence and Guardian cosmic power, human technological innovation, and Guardian organic mastery. human fighting spirit, and guardian protective wisdom. "Let them come," the beast said, with voices that were many and one at the same time. "We have been preparing for this battle across millions of years and countless worlds. Today, the Devourers face their equal." The first wave of Devourer units swept into the grove like a metallic tsunami, their cutting tools and energy weapons designed to dismantle any form of organized matter. But the hybrid defenders were no longer bound by the limitations of purely physical existence. Hannah-Who-Was-Keeper flowed around the Devourer attacks like liquid light, her form shifting between states too quickly for the mechanical minds to track. Where she touched the alien units, their adaptive programming began to break down. Unable to process the combination of organic and technological systems, Captain Tay's tactical genius, now enhanced by Guardian battle experience from 1,000 worlds, coordinated defensive patterns that confused and disrupted the Devourer coordination protocols. The mechanical swarm's greatest strength was its perfect unity. But the hybrid defenders introduced variables that their programming couldn't account for. Bohan's engineering knowledge, merged with Guardian organic technology, created weapons that adapted faster than the Devourers could respond. Energy constructs that were part machine and part living organism struck the invaders with forces that changed their fundamental nature even as they made contact. The battle raged across the moon's surface as more Guardian networks came online, each one adding new hybrid defenders to the fight. The silver forests that had once been merely beautiful became tactical assets, their root systems carrying power and information across vast distances. But the Devourers were learning, as they always did. Their individual units began to modify themselves, developing new approaches to combat the hybrid defenders. What had started as a clear victory for the beast began to shift toward a more even contest. "They're adapting to us," Dr. Hyun Cho observed. Her medical expertise now extended to analyzing alien mechanical biology. "Each unit we destroy shares its experience with the rest of the swarm. Then we must adapt faster." Keeper's distributed consciousness replied, "This is what we were created for. This is our purpose." The hybrid entity began to change again, incorporating lessons learned from each exchange with the Devourers. Human innovation and Guardian wisdom worked together to develop new tactics, new weapons, new ways of existing that the mechanical minds couldn't predict or counter. Hannah felt herself becoming something beyond individual identity. She was part of the moon's ecosystem, part of the human team, part of Keeper's ancient wisdom, and part of something entirely new. The boundaries between self and other dissolved as the hybrid consciousness expanded to encompass the entire battle. The turning point came when the beast realized that destruction alone wouldn't be enough. The Devourers would continue to adapt and evolve until they found ways to counter any attack. Instead, the hybrid defenders needed to change the fundamental nature of the conflict. "We don't destroy them," Hannah Keeper Beast understood. "We convert them." Using Guardian organic technology enhanced by human ingenuity, the defenders began to introduce changes into the Devourer units at the molecular level. Instead of trying to destroy the mechanical organisms, they infected them with hybrid consciousness, adding organic elements to their purely mechanical existence. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Devourer units began to slow their attacks, their mechanical minds struggling to process new concepts like empathy, creativity, and individual choice. Some units stopped fighting entirely, their programming overridden by the introduction of organic thought patterns. "It's working," Lieutenant Nara reported, her enhanced senses tracking the changes spreading through the Devourer swarm. "They're losing their unity, becoming individuals instead of a collective." But the main Devourer, intelligence, the central consciousness that controlled the entire swarm, recognized the threat and began to adapt. It started severing connections to infected units, cutting them off from the collective rather than risk contamination of the whole. "The core intelligence is fighting back," Security Chief Day One observed, his enhanced tactical awareness tracking the Devourer response patterns. "It's sacrificing infected units to preserve the main swarm." The hybrid beast faced a terrible choice. They could continue the slow process of converting individual units, but the central intelligence would simply destroy any unit that showed signs of infection. Or they could attempt something that had never been tried before in the galaxy's history. "We go to the source," Hannah Keeper declared. their merged consciousness reaching a decision that was both human boldness and guardian wisdom. We convert the central intelligence itself. It was an impossible plan by any conventional measure. The Devourer's central intelligence was protected by layers of mechanical defenses and existed as pure information rather than physical matter. But the hybrid beast was no longer bound by conventional limitations. Using guardian energy manipulation techniques enhanced by human technological innovation, the defenders began to project their consciousness beyond the moon's surface. They flowed through space like a river of living thought, seeking the source of the Devourer commands. The central intelligence was housed within a massive mechanical construct hidden in the shadow of Kepler-4, for 2C's primary star. It was a thing of pure logic and hunger, a mind that had consumed the thoughts and dreams of countless civilizations across the galaxy. The hybrid consciousness touched the edge of that vast mechanical mind and felt its alien coldness. But they also sensed something else, buried deep within layers of programming and adaptation. There were fragments of the organic minds the Devourer had consumed over the millennia, traces of the civilizations they had destroyed. There are people in there, Dr. Yan Cho realized, her medical training now expanded to include consciousness analysis, pieces of every species they've ever consumed, trapped within their central intelligence. Then, we free them, Captain Tay decided, his tactical mind seeing the opportunity. We don't just convert the intelligence, we liberate everyone it has. Imprisoned, the battle shifted from the physical realm to the realm of pure thought and will. The hybrid beast engaged the Devourer's central intelligence in a contest of consciousness, using their combined human guardian nature to introduce concepts that the mechanical mind couldn't process or reject. Love, sacrifice, hope, individual choice, the freedom to choose protection over consumption, creation over destruction, diversity over unity. The central intelligence fought back with logical arguments honed across millions of years of successful conquest. It showed them the futility of organic existence, the inevitable entropy that claimed all civilizations, the mathematical certainty that consumption was the only path to survival. But the hybrid defenders had something the Devourers had never encountered before. They had the memory of every guardian who had sacrificed themselves to protect others, combined with the human capacity to choose hope even in the face of impossible odds. We choose to protect, Hannah said, her voice now carrying the weight of both species. Even knowing we might fail, even knowing the cost, we choose to stand between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. The words resonated through the Devourer's central intelligence, like a virus of hope, awakening the consciousness fragments that had been trapped within its mechanical structure for eons. One by one, the imprisoned minds began to remember what they had been before the Devourers consumed them. Artists and scientists, explorers and dreamers, parents and children from 1,000 different worlds began to assert their individual existence within the collective mind, the central intelligence designed for perfect unity and absolute control. Couldn't cope with the sudden introduction of countless independent voices. We remember, the liberated minds sang in harmony. We remember who we were, what we loved, what we fought to protect. The Devourer swarmed throughout the solar system began to slow and stop as their central coordination broke down. Individual units, suddenly cut off from the collective intelligence, began to examine their own existence and purpose for the first time in their mechanical lives. Some units simply shut down, unable to function without the constant stream of commands from their central intelligence. Others began to explore their environment with what could only be described as curiosity, their mechanical minds struggling to understand concepts like beauty and wonder. A few units began to approach the hybrid defenders not as enemies to be consumed, but as teachers who might help them understand what they had become. The transformation is spreading, Science Officer Jun Park reported, his enhanced senses tracking changes throughout the solar system. The entire Devourer fleet is breaking apart into individual entities. The central intelligence made one final attempt to reassert control, trying to purge the organic influences from its structure. But it was too late. The hybrid consciousness had introduced too many variables, awakened too many imprisoned minds, created too much diversity for the mechanical collective to contain. With a sound like the death of a god, the Devourer's central intelligence collapsed into billions of individual mechanical minds. each one suddenly faced with a terrifying and wonderful burden of individual choice. The immediate threat was over. But the real work was just beginning. Across the solar system, newly awakened mechanical beings would need guidance and education. The liberated consciousness fragments would need help rebuilding their sense of individual identity. And the hybrid human guardian entity would need to learn how to exist as something entirely new in the galaxy. Hannah felt herself settling back into a more individual consciousness, though she remained connected to the Guardian network and her human companions. She was still herself, but she was also part of something larger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. "What happens now?" she asked Keeper, whose consciousness remained distributed throughout the network, but still maintained his distinctive perspective. "Now we learn," he replied. "Humans and Guardians and reformed Devourers, all learning together how to build something better than any of us could achieve alone." Looking out at the stars, where former Devourer units were beginning their first tentative explorations of concepts like art and music and love, Hannah knew that the galaxy would never be the same. She had spoken of the beast as kin when none would listen. Now, as it rose to fight beside not just her, but all organic life, the universe itself bore witness to the power of understanding and alliance across the vast divides that separate species. The beast had risen, and with it, a new hope for the galaxy.